Saleswoman humiliated the elderly farmer, but when she discovered how much he'd spend, Jessica Miller stared at the management email with trembling hands. After 3 consecutive months below target, the American Tractors dealership had issued an ultimatum. Either she sold 5 luxury tractors in 30 days, or she'd be fired without any severance. Her financed apartment, her sick mother's medical bills, everything depended on that job she'd worked so hard to land after her messy divorce left her with nothing 2 years ago. Rubbing her tired eyes, she remembered the promise she'd made when hired: never depend on anyone again. Every commission was a step toward independence, every sale proof she'd overcome the trauma of an abusive marriage where she'd been constantly belittled. Just then the doorbell chimed. A man around 75, wearing a light pink shirt, simple dark pants and a worn brown jacket, shuffled slowly into the showroom. He carried an old leather briefcase with frayed corners, as if it had survived decades. Jessica eyed his dusty boots leaving faint marks on the polished floor, and rolled her eyes. In Riverdale, rural New York, curious farmers dropping by wasn't unusual, but wasting time on someone who clearly couldn't afford anything was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. "Good morning, young lady," the man greeted with a kind smile. "Could you show me the Farm Force 9800? I heard it arrived last week." Jessica couldn't hide her surprise. That model was the most expensive in the store, brand new, cutting edge, priced over $1.5 million. "You want to see the Farm Force?" she repeated, her condescending smile barely masking mockery. "Are you sure you wouldn't rather start with something more affordable?" Michael Johnson, another salesman helping a couple nearby, glanced up at her tone. He shot her a disapproving look, but she ignored it. No, the man replied calmly. "I specifically need that model. I've heard great things about its GPS navigation and fuel efficiency." Jessica let out a short laugh, glancing at Michael's clients as if inviting them to share the joke. "Of course, sir, but just so you know, this tractor costs more than some apartments in New York City. Starts at $1.5 million, she emphasized, louder than necessary. The old man didn't flinch. "I understand. I'd still like to see it." Jessica sighed dramatically and led him to the massive green and yellow tractor displayed center stage. As they walked, she rapid-fired technical specs in complex jargon, clearly trying to overwhelm him. "Here it is. Turbo intercooler engine, 620 horsepower, smart farming system with digital mapping, infinitely variable transmission." She watched his face, expecting confusion. To her shock, he listened intently and nodded knowingly. "Interesting. What about hydraulic capacity and the rear lift system?" Jessica hesitated. "It's the best on the market," she deflected, unsure of the exact answer. "But with all due respect, sir, these tractors are usually bought by large-scale farmers or agribusinesses. Financing requires substantial proof of income and—" "I don't. I need financing," he interrupted calmly. A louder laugh burst from Jessica's throat. This time, even nearby customers turned. "Oh, of course," she said, making no effort to hide her scorn. "So you'll pay in cash then?" she added, her tone dripping with provocation. The elderly man looked at her for a few seconds. An uncomfortable silence settled in. Then, without changing his serene expression, he said, "I thought I'd be treated with respect here, regardless of my appearance." Jessica felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't back down. "Sir, it's not about appearance, it's a practical matter." She placed her hand on his shoulder with false sympathy. "Perhaps you should visit our used tractor line. We have models starting at $300,000. That won't be necessary," he interrupted, gently stepping away from her touch. He walked toward the exit but turned back before leaving. "Thank you for your time, miss." As soon as the door closed, Jessica heard the deep voice of Richard Thompson, the dealership manager. "What did you just do?" he asked, his face full of disbelief. "What, that old man? Come on, Richard, he was just killing time. I saved us both from a monumental waste of time." Richard took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses. "What? If he had the potential to buy? Dressed like that, with those dusty boots, carrying a briefcase that looked straight out of a 1950s movie?" Jessica laughed. "Impossible." The manager shook his head, visibly annoyed. "You're in a delicate position, Jessica. You can't afford to dismiss any customer," he said before walking away. She shrugged and returned to her desk. The 30-day deadline to sell 5 luxury tractors seemed more impossible than ever. The next morning, Jessica was the first to arrive at the dealership. She wanted to review the records of old customers, hoping to find someone interested in a new purchase. As she organized her notes, she saw Richard walk in with a graver expression than usual. "Emergency meeting in 5 minutes," he announced, heading straight to the conference room. All the salespeople exchanged nervous glances. Emergency meetings were never a good sign. In the room, Richard didn't mince words. "Headquarters just informed us our branch is under review. Sales dropped 40% last quarter, and we're among the 3 worst dealerships in the network. If we don't turn this around in the next 2 months, there's a high chance we'll close." A murmur of concern filled the room. Jessica's stomach tightened. "Everyone will have new individual targets starting today," Richard continued, handing out folders. "Jessica, in your case, it's still the 5 luxury tractors in 30 days. No negotiation." She swallowed hard. She knew it was practically impossible. "Richard, no one has ever sold 5 Farm Force tractors in a month, not even in the best times," she argued. The manager stared at her coldly. "Then it'll be the first time, or it'll be the last time you sell anything at this company." Richard's words echoed like a familiar nightmare for Jessica. Her ex-husband, Robert, used the exact same tone when he'd threaten and belittle her. "Either you do it my way or you're out of my life." It was that constant ultimatum that had shaped her for years, building layers of defense that showed as arrogance and coldness. Defensive, she straightened her posture. "I'll do the impossible then," she replied with a confidence she didn't feel. After the meeting in the women's restroom, Jessica took a deep breath as she stared at her reflection. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "You've survived worse." In that brief moment of vulnerability, memories surfaced of the days she slept on her sister's couch after fleeing with just a suitcase of clothes. How she'd sworn she'd never be weak again, never dependent again. She quickly wiped away the tears and fixed her makeup. The tough saleswoman's mask slipped back into place. The meeting ended with a heavy atmosphere. Back at her desk, Jessica tried to maintain her composure, but inside desperation was growing. At 32, divorced and with apartment payments to make, losing her job wasn't an option. Over the week, she visited 3 potential clients, made dozens of calls and sent personalized proposals, all with no concrete results. On Friday, as she typed yet another email, she spotted a familiar figure approaching the dealership through the window. The elderly man in dusty boots was back. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, back to the story. Jessica felt her heart race. Part of her wanted to hide, but the desperate side thought maybe she could undo the bad impression. She stood quickly, but to her dismay she saw the old man had already walked in and gone straight to Michael. "Good morning. I'd like to see the Farm Force 9800 again," the man said, not noticing Jessica approaching. "Of course, sir." Michael left the question hanging. "William Anderson," the old man replied. Jessica stepped in. "Mr. Anderson, what a pleasure to have you back. I can assist you personally, like last time." The old man turned slowly toward her. His deep, calm blue eyes studied her for a few seconds. "I'd prefer to be helped by the young man if you don't mind," he replied politely but firmly. The blow struck Jessica's pride directly. Michael shot her an apologetic look before guiding Mr. Anderson to the tractor. Pretending to organize some catalogs, Jessica positioned herself to overhear their conversation. Michael explained the technical features with precision and patience, answering the old man's sharp questions. After 40 minutes of detailed discussion, even including a demonstration of the tractor's digital system, William Anderson thanked him and asked for Michael's card. "I'll think it over carefully and get back to you soon," the man said. Once the customer left, Jessica approached Michael. "Is he really interested or just killing time?" Michael adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Jessica, that man knows more about tractors than half the people in this dealership. The questions he asked..." He shook his head, impressed. "And from what he mentioned, He owns a sizable property." "What? That little old man?" "He mentioned in passing that he's updating the equipment fleet for his farms." Michael emphasized the plural. "Farms, Jessica, plural." The ground seemed to vanish beneath her feet. "No way," she thought. "Are you saying I—" "Exactly. You might have scared off one of the biggest potential clients we've ever had." Michael shrugged. "But he'll probably be back." He seemed really interested in the model. For the rest of the day, Jessica couldn't focus. The thought of making such a grave mistake wouldn't leave her mind. At the end of her shift, when everyone had left, she went to Michael's desk and discreetly copied the address Mr. Anderson had left on the contact form. On Saturday morning, breaking her habit of sleeping in on her day off, Jessica woke up early and drove her small white Civic out of the city. The address led to a property about 70 miles from Riverdale, toward an area known for its vast sugarcane and soybean fields. After nearly 2 hours of driving, including a long stretch of dirt road, she spotted an imposing gate with the words "New Horizon Farm" written across it. The entrance was guarded by an employee in a booth. "Good morning," she said, rolling down her window. "I'd like to speak with Mr. William Anderson." The employee eyed her suspiciously. "Is the boss expecting you?" "Not exactly, but it's an important matter about the tractors he's interested in purchasing," she improvised, trying to sound professional. "One moment." The man grabbed a walkie-talkie. "Vincent, there's a young lady here wanting to speak with William about tractors." "Yes, got it." Turning back to Jessica, he said, "Follow the main road to the main house. Vincent will meet you there." Jessica thanked him and drove down the impeccably maintained path lined with well-kept gardens. As she drove, her eyes widened at the sheer size of the property. In the distance, she could see massive warehouses, modern silos, and a private airstrip with a small plane parked. "My God, where have I ended up?" she thought, her stomach sinking. At the main house, a grand, modernized, colonial-style home, she was greeted by a man around 30. "Good morning. I'm Vincent Anderson, William's son. How can I help you?" Jessica swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how reckless this was. "Good morning, I'm Jessica Miller from American Tractors. I just wanted to speak with your father about the tractors he looked at this week." Vincent frowned. "That's odd. My father didn't mention expecting anyone from the dealership today." "Actually, he doesn't know I'm coming," Jessica admitted, her cheeks burning. "It was my own initiative." Vincent's expression grew more skeptical. "I see. Wait here, please." As she stood on the porch, Jessica watched the farm's activity. Workers moved with purpose, modern equipment carried out various tasks, and in the distance, a line of tractors, none older than 3 years, she guessed, worked a field that stretched as far as she could see. After a few minutes, Vincent returned. "My father will see you, but he only has 15 minutes. Jessica was led through a spacious living room decorated with a mix of rustic and modern pieces to a back porch. There, sitting in a rocking chair and enjoying the farm's panoramic view, was William Anderson. Beside him, on a table, lay the same worn leather briefcase he'd carried at the dealership. "Miss Jessica," he said without turning, "what an unexpected surprise." "Mr. Anderson, She hesitated, her throat dry. "Please sit." He gestured to a nearby chair. Only when she settled did he turn to face her. "What brings you to my home on a Saturday morning?" Jessica took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I came to apologize for how I treated you at the dealership. It was completely inappropriate and unprofessional. I have no excuses." William studied her face for a few seconds, as if weighing her sincerity. "And what made you drive all the way here for that? You could have apologized next time I visited the store." The direct question caught her off guard. "Well, she stammered, fighting the urge to make up a polished excuse. She chose the truth. "I found out you own several farms and are genuinely interested in buying the tractors. I panicked at the thought of losing such an important client, especially since I'm at risk of being fired if I don't meet impossible sales goals this month." A faint smile tugged at the farmer's lips. "At least you're honest about your motives," he remarked. "I prefer that to empty apologies." Just then, a maid brought a tray with coffee, water, and some homemade cookies. William poured himself coffee and offered some to Jessica, who accepted with slightly trembling hands. "Miss Jessica, do you know why I wore those plain clothes? To the dealership?" "No, sir, because I wanted to be treated like any other customer. I wanted to evaluate not just the tractors, but the people selling them." He took a sip of coffee. 40 years ago, when I was just starting out, I was humiliated at a dealership much like yours. The salesman didn't even bother to show me the models, said I was wasting his time. Jessica felt her face burn with shame. "And what did you do?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "Exactly what I did with you. I left in silence," William replied. 2 years later, I went back to the same dealership and bought every tractor in the showroom. The salesman who disrespected me was still working there. He didn't recognize me until I reminded him of our first meeting. The silence that followed weighed like lead. Jessica stared at the coffee cup in her hands, unable to meet the farmer's eyes. "So you go to dealerships to test people?" she finally asked. "Not exactly," William smiled. "I really do need new tractors. New Horizon Farm is just one of 3 properties I own. We're expanding production this year and need to upgrade the entire fleet." Before Jessica could respond, William's phone rang. He answered quickly, and his expression shifted to concern. "What do you mean she's missing? Since when?" His voice grew tense. "Did you try the hospital in Milan and the consulate?" Jessica watched, unsure how to react. After a few more questions, William hung up, visibly upset. "Did something serious happen?" The farmer took a deep breath. "My daughter Emily is in Italy attending a seminar on sustainable agriculture. She didn't show up for this morning's session and no one can reach her. They checked the hotel, but she hasn't been there since last night." "Oh my God, that's awful," Jessica replied, genuinely worried. "Is there anything I can do?" William shook his head, rubbing his temples. "I don't think so. Vincent is trying to reach the US consulate, but on a Saturday it's nearly impossible." Jessica hesitated for a moment, then said, "Before I worked in sales, I was an international relations assistant at a multinational company. I have some contacts who might be able to help." William looked at her with sudden interest. "What kind of contacts?" "I know someone at the US Embassy in Rome and a former colleague who works for an international security firm," she explained, already reaching for her phone. "If you'll allow me, I can make a few calls." The farmer nodded, signaling for her to proceed. Jessica immediately began making calls, switching between English, Portuguese, and even a few basic Italian phrases. After nearly an hour of conversations, transfers, and redirections, she got a valuable lead. "Mr. Anderson, I spoke with the reception desk at Mercy General Hospital in Milan. A US citizen was admitted last night with severe dehydration, apparently from food poisoning. She didn't have any ID, so they couldn't make contact. From the description, it sounds like your daughter." The relief on the farmer's face was instant. "How did you manage that?" "We've been trying since 5 this morning." Jessica gave a small smile. "Sometimes it's not just about who you know, but how you ask. And a little luck, too. The receptionist's brother lived in the United States for 2 years, and when I mentioned it involved an American, she was more receptive." For the first time, William looked at Jessica as if truly seeing her. "Thank you," he said simply, but with unmistakable sincerity. The next few hours were a flurry of calls and arrangements. Jessica, now fully involved, helped coordinate communication with the hospital, ensuring Emily received the best care and facilitating direct contact between the doctors and the family. By the time the situation finally stabilized, it was well past 2 in the afternoon. Jessica, glancing at her watch, realized she had stayed much longer than intended. "I should go, Mr. William. I don't want to overstay my welcome." The farmer, who had just finished a call with his now recovered daughter, shook his head. "Stay for lunch, Jessica. It's the least I can offer after the help you've given us." The meal was served on the porch, a hearty farm lunch with rice, beans, roasted meat, fresh vegetables from the garden, and a dessert of caramelized milk with cheese. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Jessica learned that William, despite his current wealth, had started from nothing, working as a farmhand until he could buy his first piece of land. I never had a formal education, but I learned by doing, he shared. And I've always valued a person's character more than their looks or diplomas. The indirect remark didn't escape Jessica, who lowered her eyes, embarrassed. I'm sure I deserve every criticism for how I treated you. What matters isn't the mistake, but what we learn from it, William replied. And speaking of learning, tell me more about those Farm Force tractors. I'm still considering the purchase. Jessica blinked, surprised by the unexpected opportunity. You're still interested in buying from us? I'm interested in buying from someone who treats me with honesty and respect, he answered. And today, I saw a side of you that made me reconsider my first impression. With renewed enthusiasm, Jessica began explaining the tractor features in detail, this time with genuine interest in helping the customer make the best choice. By the end of her impromptu presentation, William seemed satisfied. Impressive how well you know the technical specs when you actually want to sell, he remarked with a smile. Jessica flushed again. Truthfully, I spent last night studying everything about the models after Michael told me you might be an important client. Her honesty drew a laugh from William. At least you're sincere. So how much commission would you make if I bought, say, 5 of these tractors? The exact number she needed to save her job made Jessica choke on her juice. It would be a considerable commission, she replied, avoiding specific figures. Enough to save your job? Definitely. William fell silent for a moment, drumming his fingers on the table. I'll make you an offer, Jessica. I'll come back to the dealership on Monday to discuss the purchase, but on one condition. I want Michael and you to work together on this. Sale him because he's treated me with respect from the start, and you, well, let's say you deserve a second chance. Jessica could hardly believe what she was hearing. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. William. Don't thank me yet, he raised a hand. I'm not promising to buy. I'm promising to seriously consider your offer. The outcome will depend on how I'm treated and the terms presented. She nodded, understanding perfectly. It was more than she could have hoped for after the initial disaster. As she said goodbye, late that afternoon, Jessica felt transformed. The day's experience had stirred something deep within her. Mr. William, no matter what happens with the sale, thank you for the lesson today. I really needed it. The old farmer smiled, his blue eyes twinkling with wisdom. Sometimes we need to get lost to find the right path, Jessica. On the drive back to the city, watching the vast fields pass by her car window, she reflected on how a single day and an unexpected encounter could completely change a person's perspective. On Monday, Jessica arrived at the dealership an hour early. She was both anxious and apprehensive. She had spent the entire Sunday studying every detail of the tractors, preparing sales pitches, and analyzing possible negotiation terms that might interest William. Michael arrived shortly after, and was surprised to see her organizing catalogs and preparing a presentation on the store's tablet. Up early today, huh? He commented, placing his briefcase on the table. Michael, I need to tell you something. Jessica took a deep breath and summarized the events of Saturday, including her visit to the farm and the agreement with William. Her colleague listened with widening eyes. You had the courage to go there. He seemed torn between admiration and disbelief. And he's really coming today to discuss buying 5 tractors from us. Yes, but it's not guaranteed. He'll decide based on how he's treated today, Jessica explained. That's why I wanted to propose a partnership. We split the commission 50-50, no matter who closes the sale. Michael considered the offer for a moment. You're really in no position to negotiate, are you? If I refuse, you'll probably lose your job. Jessica felt a tightness in her chest but nodded. True, but I'm still proposing a fair split. You've treated him with respect from the start. You deserve your share. Michael extended his hand. Deal. Let's work on this together. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Around 10:30 a.m., Richard approached the pair with a puzzled expression. You two plotting something? I've never seen so much cooperation between salespeople in this store. We're expecting an important client, Michael replied diplomatically. What client? The manager asked suspiciously. Just then, the dealership door opened and William Anderson walked in. This time, however, he was accompanied by a younger man, Vincent, his son, and dressed more formally, dark dress pants, a crisp shirt, and a subtle blazer. The leather briefcase was still in his hand. Richard immediately recognized the man Jessica had disrespected the week before and shot her a panicked look. Before he could intervene, Jessica and Michael were already walking over to greet the visitors. "Mr. Anderson, what a pleasure to see you again," Michael greeted. "And you must be Vincent. Welcome to American Tractors." Jessica extended her hand with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson." "Mr. Vincent, it's a pleasure to have you here. We've prepared a special presentation of the models we discussed." Richard stepped forward, visibly nervous. "Gentlemen, I'm Richard Thompson, the dealership manager. If you prefer, I can assist you personally in the office, or—" "That won't be necessary," William interrupted politely. "I'm in good hands with Jessica and Michael." The manager swallowed hard and stepped back, giving Jessica a confused look. She simply smiled calmly. Over the next 2 hours, the sales duo guided William and Vincent through a detailed presentation of the Farm Force 9800 tractors. Jessica surprised everyone with her newly acquired technical knowledge, answering even the most specific questions with precision. "I'm impressed by your command of the subject, Miss Miller," Vincent remarked after she explained the engine's electronic injection system in detail. "Let's just say I had strong motivation to study," she replied with a subtle smile, exchanging a knowing glance with William. After the presentation, they all moved to a meeting room where Michael presented the commercial terms. William listened attentively, took some notes, and then opened his briefcase, pulling out a folder of documents. "I have a counteroffer," he said. "Guys, I'm not just interested in the 5 Farm Force 9800s, but also in 3 premium line harvesters and 2 transport trucks, a complete package to modernize the operations of my 3 farms." Jessica and Michael exchanged stunned looks. The proposal represented a sale of unprecedented scale in the dealership's history. This would be an investment of approximately, Michael quickly calculated on his calculator, around $12 million, William finished calmly. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Jessica felt the room spin slightly. "We can arrange special terms for an order of this size, Mr. Anderson," she managed to say, regaining her composure, "including significant discounts on the full package." "Excellent, and I want you and Michael to handle the entire process from paperwork to delivery and installation on the properties," the farmer specified. Richard, who had been watching the meeting from the doorway with wide eyes, entered the room with a broad smile. "Mr. Anderson, it's an honor to receive an order of this magnitude. I'll personally ensure everything is handled in the most—" "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," William interrupted politely. "But as I said, I want Jessica and Michael to take care of everything. If that's not possible, I may reconsider my decision." Richard's smile froze, but he quickly nodded. Of course. They'll be entirely at your disposal." When the final details were settled and a preliminary contract signed, William stood to leave. Before saying goodbye, he looked at Jessica. "Sometimes we need people to surprise us, don't we?" She smiled, understanding the implicit message. "And sometimes we need to surprise ourselves first." After the Andersons left, the entire dealership erupted in chatter and congratulations. Richard, who just days ago had threatened to fire Jessica, now treated her like the most valuable salesperson on the team. "You never told me how you turned things around with Mr. Anderson," he pressed, as everyone celebrated with a special coffee he'd ordered. Jessica exchanged a knowing glance with Michael. "Let's just say I learned you can't always judge a book by its cover," she replied, thinking how her life had changed drastically in just 3 days. That evening, Jessica invited Michael to dinner as thanks for his help. At a simple restaurant downtown, she finally mustered the courage to ask what had been on her mind from the start. "Why did you help me with Mr. Anderson? We could have competed for the sale, and after how I treated him," she hesitated. "It's not what most people would have done." Michael took a sip of his soda before answering. "My father was like Mr. Anderson," he began, "a simple man who built everything through hard work. When I was a kid, I saw many people judge him by his appearance. his calloused hands, his thick country accent, his eyes fixed on a distant point, remembering. Once, at a department store, the salesman refused to show my father a suit he wanted to buy for my wedding, said he was sure it'd be out of his budget. "What happened?" Jessica asked, genuinely curious. My father just smiled, thanked him, and we left. The next day we returned to the same store. He was wearing his only suit, an old watch he got from my grandfather, and carrying a leather briefcase. He asked to speak to the manager and bought the entire store. Jessica's eyes widened. "He bought the store," Michael laughed. "Not literally, but he owned a small supermarket chain in rural Pennsylvania and decided all employee uniforms and corporate event attire would be purchased from that chain. A contract worth far more than the suit the salesman refused to show. And the salesman, the manager, fired him on the spot." Michael paused. "It was harsh, and you know what my father did? He hired the guy to work in the clothing section of one of the supermarkets, gave him a second chance." Jessica felt a lump in her throat. "Your father sounds like he was a great man." "He was, and he taught me that we all make mistakes. But what defines our character is what we do afterward." Michael smiled. "When I saw how genuinely remorseful you were after the incident with Mr. William, I remembered that lesson." In the weeks that followed, Jessica and Michael worked tirelessly on the details of the mega sale. Technical visits to the farms, organizing delivery logistics, training for operators. Each step demanded attention and dedication. During this process, Jessica had the chance to learn more about William Anderson's story. On one of these visits, Jessica met Emily, William's daughter, working on a sustainable irrigation project at the farm. The young agronomist, recovered from the incident in Italy, watched Jessica with curiosity as she jotted down technical details for the operator training. "So you're the famous saleswoman," Emily remarked, approaching with a friendly smile. "My father won't stop talking about how you impressed him." Jessica blushed slightly. "After misjudging him so badly at first, I've been trying to make up for it." Emily laughed, a bright sound that reminded Jessica of her father. "Dad's always been like that, wears those simple clothes and carries that old briefcase as a kind of character test." She adjusted her hat, shielding herself from the sun. "When we were kids, he'd sometimes take us shopping dressed like a farmhand. Said he wanted us to value people for who they are, not what they appear to have." "A valuable lesson," Jessica remarked admiringly. "It didn't always work as he hoped." Emily smiled at the memory. "Once, when I was about 8, we went to a toy store in New York City. Dad was in his farm clothes and the saleswoman barely looked at us. I got so mad I started yelling that my father owned 3 farms and could buy the whole store if he wanted." Jessica couldn't hold back a laugh. "What did he do?" "He was mortified. He dragged me out right then and gave me a long lecture on humility." Emily shook her head. "It was one of the few times I ever saw him truly angry. With me." As they walked together through the fields, Emily continued, "You know, when you helped track me down in Italy, it was the first time I saw my father trust someone outside the family so quickly. He's usually very cautious." Jessica felt a warmth of gratitude spread through her chest. "It was the least I could do after how I treated him. Maybe, but the way you mobilized your contacts, how you didn't give up until you found me, that showed your true character." Emily stopped, looking directly at Jessica. "Dad always says it's in crises that we really get to know people." That conversation sparked an unexpected bond between Jessica and Emily. In later visits, the two often had lunch together, and the engineer began consulting her on strategies to implement new technologies efficiently. It was a budding friendship Jessica could never have predicted. During this time, Jessica had more opportunities to learn about William Anderson's past. One afternoon, while waiting for technicians to arrive for an inspection at New Horizon Farm, the farmer invited her for coffee on the porch, the same spot where they'd had that transformative conversation on that Saturday. "You know, Jessica, when I was 20 years old, I worked as a farmhand in the fields around here," he began, gazing at the land that now belonged to him. "My dream was to own a piece of land, no matter how small. I saved every penny for years." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "When I finally had enough to buy a small plot, I needed a tractor to start farming. That's when I went to That dealership I mentioned? The salesman took one look at my worn clothes and calloused hands and decided I wasn't worth his time. Jessica listened intently, absorbing every word. What did you do after that? I found another salesman in a different town. An older gentleman who had been a farmer before going into sales. He didn't care about my appearance, only my plans and determination. William smiled at the memory. Not only did he sell me a used tractor I could afford, but he also taught me how to operate it and do basic maintenance. And that's how it all began? Jessica asked, fascinated. Yes, that old noisy tractor was the start of all this, he said, gesturing broadly at the property. You know why I still carry that old briefcase? Jessica shook her head, curious. It was the first valuable thing I bought when I started turning a profit. Inside, I kept the contract for the first loan I got to expand the farm, the deed to the first property I bought, and the receipt for that old tractor, he explained, his gaze distant. It's my daily reminder of where I came from and how small decisions and encounters can completely change the course of a life. The story moved Jessica deeply. She thought about how meeting William had not only changed her professional situation, but also her perspective on people and life. You could have punished me for how I treated you, but instead you gave me a chance to learn and grow, she remarked. Why? William smiled, his blue eyes shining with wisdom. Because I saw something in you that maybe you hadn't seen yet. When you helped with my daughter's situation, I realized that behind that arrogant saleswoman was a capable, intelligent woman with a good heart deep down. I don't even know if I deserve that, Jessica replied, touched. It's not about deserving, Jessica. It's about choosing who you want to be from now on. Those words would stay with her for years to come, guiding her decisions and actions. The big day for the delivery of the first tractors arrived. The dealership organized a special event, complete with a celebratory banner and coverage from the local press. After all, it was the biggest sale in the history of not just that branch, but the entire American Tractors network in the state. Jessica, now promoted to corporate sales manager, a position created just for her after the success of the deal, looked radiant in her new women's suit. Michael, equally promoted to senior consultant, smiled beside her as they waited for William and his family to arrive. When the farmer appeared, accompanied by Vincent and Emily, now fully recovered from her experience in Italy, all the dealership employees applauded. "Welcome to the delivery ceremony," Richard announced grandly. "It is with immense pride that we celebrate today not just a business partnership, but a friendship that—" As the manager spoke, Jessica noticed William had brought his ever-present leather briefcase. Strangely, it seemed heavier than usual. After the speeches and the symbolic handing over of the tractor keys, a brunch was held for the guests. Jessica approached William, who was admiring the imposing green and yellow tractors lined up in the dealership's outdoor lot. "They're magnificent, aren't they?" she commented, following his gaze. "They are," agreed William. "But do you know what's most magnificent? Seeing how people can change, evolve, surprise." He turned to Jessica with an enigmatic smile. "I have something to show you," he said, pointing to his briefcase on a nearby table. "Come." Intrigued, Jessica followed him. William opened the briefcase and pulled out an old folder. "This is the record of my first harvest. I managed to gather enough to pay off the tractor loan and still had some left to invest in more land." He flipped through the yellowed notebook, showing meticulous handwritten notes. "And this," he took out a black and white photograph, "is from the day I bought my first brand new tractor." In the picture, a much younger William, perhaps in his early 30s, smiled proudly next to a basic tractor, nothing like the sophisticated models he had just acquired. "I was as proud of that machine as I am of these today," he remarked nostalgically. "And here," he pulled out another photo, "is the salesman who believed in me when no one else did." Jessica looked at the image of a gray-haired man standing beside the young William, both smiling at the camera. "His name was George Smith. He passed away 15 years ago, but I never forgot what he did for me," William explained, his voice thick with emotion. "After my business prospered, I offered him a partnership in one of my farms, but he refused. He said his greatest joy was seeing the clients he helped succeed." Jessica felt a lump in her throat. That story touched something deep inside her. "So that's why you gave me a second chance," she concluded. "You were following his example." William nodded. "George always said, everyone deserves the chance to show their best. You remind me a little of him, you know? Not in looks, of course, but in determination, when you truly commit to something." He took an envelope from the briefcase and handed it to Jessica. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it." Inside the envelope were a letter and a check. The letter was a formal invitation for Jessica to become an agricultural modernization consultant for the Anderson Group of Farms. I don't understand," she murmured, confused. "You want me to leave the dealership?" "I want you to expand your horizons," William replied. "Stay at the dealership, but dedicate 20% of your time to helping us implement new technologies on the farms. Vincent has big plans to make our operations more sustainable and efficient, and we believe your vision could contribute significantly." Jessica was speechless. The proposal meant not only a considerable increase in income, but also a professional growth opportunity she had never imagined. "Why me?" she finally managed to ask. "Because you've shown two rare qualities: the ability to admit mistakes and the determination to fix them. Those are traits I value more than degrees or experience." She looked again at the check, a generous advance for consulting services, and the detailed contract attached. "I don't know what to say, William." "Say you'll think it. Go over carefully and give me an answer by the end of the week," he smiled. "And also that you'll stop calling me William all the time. It makes me feel even older." Jessica laughed, discreetly wiping away a stubborn tear. "I'll think it over carefully." William. That night, in her small apartment, Jessica reflected on the incredible turn her life had taken. Less than a month ago, she was about to lose her job and desperate for a way out. Now, not only had she met all her targets, but she'd also received an offer that could open doors she didn't even know existed. Her phone rang. It was Michael. "So are you going to accept?" he asked bluntly. "How do you know about the offer?" Jessica asked, surprised. "William told me. Actually, part of the idea was mine." "Yours?" She nearly choked on the tea she was drinking. "Yes. When he asked me about your qualifications beyond sales, I mentioned your background in international relations and how organized and detail-oriented you are. He connected the dots and saw potential." Jessica was speechless. The same colleague who could have sabotaged her connection with William had actually helped open this new door. "Michael, thank you. Really. No need to thank me. After working together on this project, I realized you're far more capable than you let on. You just needed the right opportunity." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Michael offering insights on how to balance both roles. When she hung up, Jessica felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She looked at the proposal on the table and smiled. She knew what her answer would be. The next morning, she arrived at the dealership earlier than usual. She wanted to organize some documents and prepare a presentation of the mega sale results for the weekly team meeting. But when she got there, she found Richard pacing back and forth, visibly agitated. "What happened?" she asked when she saw him. "Headquarters just called. They're sending an auditor to evaluate our operation. It seems the sudden spike in sales raised some suspicions," he explained, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Suspicions? What do you mean?" "Apparently, there have been cases of fictitious sales at other branches to inflate numbers and earn bonuses. Since our unit jumped from the risk zone to the top of the rankings overnight." "But our sale is completely legitimate," Jessica protested. "We have all the documentation. The equipment was delivered. Payments have already started processing." Richard nodded nervously. I know. But the auditor arrives this afternoon and wants to review everything with a fine-tooth comb. If he finds any irregularities, even minor ones, it could jeopardize the entire operation." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. They had followed all standard procedures for the sale, but the magnitude of the deal had required some adjustments to the traditional forms. What if something had slipped through? "I'll review all the documentation right now," she said, heading to her desk. The next few hours were spent in intense verification. Jessica and Michael went over every line of the contracts, every signature, every attachment. Richard moved between them and his office, alternating between moments of confidence and panic. Around 3 in the afternoon, a man in a dark suit and a stern expression walked into the dealership. Paul Richardson, head auditor for American Tractors. He introduced himself coldly to the receptionist. Richard rushed out of his office, like lightning, to greet him, while Jessica and Michael exchanged anxious glances. "Let's go to the meeting room," Richard announced, leading the auditor. "Jessica, Michael, please bring the complete file for the Anderson sale." The meeting started tense. Paul Richardson meticulously examined each document, taking notes and occasionally furrowing his brow. Jessica answered questions precisely, but with each new inquiry, her stomach sank a little further. "These special payment terms don't follow company standards," the auditor noted, pointing to a clause. "They were negotiated directly with the client due to the purchase volume," Jessica explained. "Everything was approved by Mr. Thompson and regional management." Paul murmured, not seeming convinced. "And this progressive discount? It's significantly above the authorized limit for branch managers." Richard cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "We consulted the sales board by phone. They verbally approved it due to the exceptional circumstances." "Verbal approval?" The auditor raised an eyebrow. "Isn't this documented anywhere?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Jessica felt her heart race. An undocumented approval could be seen as a serious irregularity. Just then, the door to the room opened without warning, and William Anderson walked in, followed by Vincent. "Good afternoon, everyone," the farmer greeted them with his usual calm. "Mr. Anderson." Richard stood up, surprised. "We weren't expecting you today. I received a call from my lawyer informing me there was an ongoing audit related to our purchase. I thought it prudent to attend in person," William explained, turning to the auditor. "You must be Paul Richardson." The auditor seemed momentarily taken aback. "Yes, that's me, and you are—" "William Anderson, the client whose contract is being audited." He extended his hand in greeting. "And this is my son and business partner, Vincent." Paul stood to greet them, visibly surprised by the client's presence at the audit. "Mr. Thompson was just explaining some peculiarities of the contract," the auditor commented, regaining his professional composure. "Ah, yes. I imagine you're referring to the special conditions I requested," William said casually as he took a seat. "I was quite demanding. I admit, the dealership had to be flexible to meet my needs." Jessica watched the scene, impressed by William's calm in the tense situation. "Mr. Anderson, I understand that as a client you seek the best terms," Paul replied. "But from an auditing standpoint, we need to ensure all internal procedures were followed." "Naturally," William agreed. Then, opening his ever-present briefcase, he pulled out a folder. "That's why I brought this." It was a copy of the contract, but with one crucial addition. A memo on American Tractors' official letterhead, expressly authorizing all the special conditions. How did you get this?" Richard asked, stunned. "After so many years in agribusiness, I've learned never to close major deals without ensuring all parties are properly authorized," William explained calmly. "When they offered me the special terms, I requested written confirmation directly from the company's president. He arranged it promptly." Paul examined the document in disbelief. It was authentic, signed by the group's president himself, and dated a day before the contract signing. "This clarifies a great deal," the auditor murmured, clearly caught off guard. William smiled faintly. "I've been in situations where verbal agreements are forgotten when the people who approved them are no longer around. I prefer to be cautious." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. What had been a tense audit now became a mere formality. Paul continued reviewing documents, but his tone and demeanor were entirely different. During the review, the auditor paused at a specific clause about partial equipment delivery. "This condition is quite unusual," he remarked, frowning. "Normally, the company requires full payment before delivering any equipment." Jessica felt the tension return. This was one of the points she had negotiated flexibly to accommodate William's needs. "It was a specific request from Mr. Anderson," she explained. "Since the delivery of the 10 units would be staggered over 3 months, he proposed that payment follow the same schedule. The auditor looked at William, who remained unruffled. "Are you aware this condition represents a significant financial risk for American tractors?" "I am," William replied calmly. "And that's why I included the additional guarantee in Appendix 7. Paul quickly flipped through the pages until he found the mentioned document. It was a bank guarantee letter covering the full purchase amount, issued by one of the largest banks in the country. This is extraordinary," murmured the auditor, genuinely impressed. "Most clients try to negotiate favorable terms without offering anything in return." "I believe in deals where both sides win, Mr. Paul," explained William. "The flexibility I requested allows me to better manage my cash flow, and the bank guarantee gives American tractors the assurance they'll receive full payment regardless of any unforeseen circumstances." Jessica watched in awe, witnessing yet another demonstration of the business acumen that had turned the humble farm worker into one of the region's top producers. At the end of the review, the auditor closed his folder. "Well, it seems everything is in order," he announced. "In fact, this is one of the most well-documented and balanced contracts I've ever audited. I commend your team for their professionalism." When Paul left, escorted by a still-stunned Richard, Jessica turned to William. "You saved our day. I don't know how to thank you." William smiled. "I didn't save anything. I just did what any experienced businessman would do. Ensure all the details were properly documented." "But how did you know about the audit?" asked Michael. "I have friends on the board of American Tractors. When they heard about the investigation, they thought it fair to warn me since my name was involved," explained William. "So, Jessica, have you thought about my proposal?" "Yes," she replied with a smile. "I accept with great pleasure. Excellent. Start next week. Vincent will introduce you to all the ongoing projects." As they walked William and Vincent to the exit, Jessica couldn't help but reflect on how drastically her life had changed. From a saleswoman on the brink of dismissal to an agricultural modernization consultant with a promising future ahead. "You know what I admire most about you, Jessica," William remarked, pausing by the door. "Your ability to turn mistakes into opportunities for growth. It's a rare and valuable skill." The farmer's words echoed in her mind for the rest of the day. Mistakes into opportunities. Perhaps that was the secret he had discovered on his journey from a humble farm worker to a successful farmer. In the weeks and months that followed, Jessica divided her time between the dealership, where she now led a sales team, and the Anderson Group farms, where she helped implement more efficient management systems and sustainable technologies. With each new challenge, she remembered the most valuable lesson she had learned. Never judge people by appearances, and always be open to starting over after a mistake. One sunny afternoon, as she oversaw the installation of moisture sensors in the fields of New Horizon Farm, she found William watching the sunset from his favorite porch. "Care for some coffee?" he offered, gesturing to the chair beside him. Jessica accepted and sat down, taking in the same view that had amazed her nearly a year ago during her first desperate visit. "You know, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't returned to the dealership that day," she mused. "I probably would have been fired, and we never would have—" "I didn't return by chance," William interrupted, surprising her. "I came back because Michael called me." "Michael?" Jessica nearly choked on her coffee. "Yes, he called me the day after my first visit, said you were a talented saleswoman going through a rough patch and that you deserved a second chance," William revealed. "He mentioned the ultimatum you'd been given and how desperate you were to prove yourself." Jessica was stunned. "But why would he do that? We were practically competing for sales." "According to him, it was because you had shown sincere remorse for how you treated me, and because he believed that deep down you had the potential to be better than you were showing." The revelation left Jessica speechless. All this time she thought her visit to the farm had been the turning point, when in fact Michael had already intervened on her behalf even before that. "I never imagined," she murmured, moved. "Michael is like you, able to see beyond appearances. He saw in you what you couldn't see in yourself that first day." William smiled. "That's why you make such a great team." Jessica reflected on how snap judgments had almost cost her both her job and her dignity, and how the unexpected generosity of a colleague and the wisdom of a client had transformed her fate. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she finally said. "It makes me even more grateful for the opportunity." "Don't thank me," William replied, pulling a new photograph from his briefcase. "Just keep the chain going." The photo showed Jessica, Michael, William and Vincent on the day of the tractor delivery, all smiling beside the imposing machines. "This one's going in my collection of life-changing moments," the farmer explained, carefully storing the image, including my own. As she watched the sun disappear on the horizon, painting the fields gold, Jessica realized the true lesson hadn't just been about not judging by appearances, but about the human capacity for transformation and redemption. The salesperson who had once humiliated an elderly farmer had become not just a better professional, but a better person. And in that transformation, she discovered that the greatest treasures are rarely where we think they are. Just as the contents of a worn leather briefcase can be worth far more than its exterior suggests. 3 years later, the Riverdale Chamber of Commerce auditorium was packed. Local business owners, farmers from the region, and young students of business and agriculture filled every available seat. On stage, Jessica Miller adjusted the microphone as the last attendees found their places. At 35, she carried a quiet confidence very different from the defensive, arrogant posture of years past. She wore an elegant yet understated women's suit, and her eyes shone with a serenity born of self-awareness and personal fulfillment. "Good evening, everyone," she began, smiling at the audience. "It's an honor to welcome you to the launch of the Horizons program, an initiative that aims to connect young rural talent with new technologies and sustainable farming practices." In the front row, William Anderson, now 78, watched with evident pride. Beside him were Vincent, Emily, and Michael, who had become the commercial director of American Tractors after a well-deserved promotion. "Exactly 3 years ago, I was a desperate tractor salesperson trying to meet impossible targets," Jessica continued, with the honesty that had become her trademark. "I was willing to do anything to make a sale, except one thing: treat someone with respect and dignity if they didn't fit my preconceived idea of the ideal client." Murmurs and smiles spread through the auditorium. Many present knew the story, which had become almost legendary in the area. That day I made the mistake of judging Mr. William Anderson by his simple appearance and his worn leather briefcase. She looked directly at the farmer, who nodded kindly. "What I didn't know was that meeting would completely change the course of my life." Jessica continued sharing how the experience had transformed her, how she learned to value character over appearances, and how it led her to develop a program that had already guided over 50 young farmers in the region, helping them implement sustainable technologies on their properties. The Horizons program came from a simple question I asked myself after that experience. How many talents are we losing because of our prejudices? How many brilliant young people lack access to opportunities simply because they don't fit a certain mold? At the back of the auditorium, an elderly woman discreetly wiped away a tear. It was Mrs. Olivia, Jessica's mother, who had finally recovered from the serious illness that had afflicted her years earlier, thanks to the treatments her daughter could provide with her improved financial situation. "This program wouldn't be possible without the support and wisdom of Mr. William Anderson," Jessica continued. "A man who, instead of responding to my arrogance with more arrogance, chose to give me a second chance and, in doing so, taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life." William stood up to warm applause. Even at 78, he carried himself with an upright posture and lively eyes that radiated wisdom. As always, he held his inseparable leather briefcase. "Miss Jessica gives me too much credit," he said into the microphone with his deep, measured voice. "I simply recognized in her something many of us take a lifetime to learn, that our mistakes don't define who we are. It's what we do afterward that reveals our true character." The farmer paused, looking at the audience. "When I was young, I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I'd never deny a second chance to someone who showed genuine remorse and a desire to improve. The Horizons program is the embodiment of that principle, and I'm proud to be part of it." William opened his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. It's with great pleasure that I announce the Anderson Group is donating 5 acres of land near the city for the construction of the Horizons Program Training Center, along with a $2 million fund for scholarships and technology implementation projects over the next 5 years. The audience erupted in applause. Jessica, genuinely surprised by the unscripted announcement, felt tears in her eyes. When the ceremony ended, amid handshakes and congratulations, Jessica found a moment to speak privately with William. "You didn't tell me about the donation," she said, still emotional. "Some surprises are necessary," he replied with a mischievous smile. "Besides, I wanted to see your genuine reaction." Jessica laughed. "Even after 3 years, you're still testing me." "It's not a test, Jessica. It's recognition." William paused, his expression turning more serious. "You know, when Michael called me that day talking about you, I'll admit I was skeptical. I thought you'd just be another desperate salesperson trying to fix a mistake to earn a commission. And wasn't that exactly it?" she asked honestly. "At first, maybe. But what I saw afterward was a woman who didn't just acknowledge a mistake, but used that experience to completely transform herself. You could have simply closed the sale and moved on. Instead, you created a program that's already changed dozens of young lives." Jessica felt a lump in her throat. "You were the one who gave me that opportunity." "I only opened the door," William corrected gently. "You chose to walk through it and build something meaningful on the other side." Just then, a young woman of about 22 approached them, dressed simply, but with a determined spark in her eyes. "Miss Jessica," she called timidly, "I'm Lily Foster from the New Hope Settlement. I wanted to personally thank you for the Horizons Program Scholarship. Thanks to it, I'll be the first in my family to attend college." Jessica smiled, introducing her to William. Lily developed a drip irrigation system adapted for small farms using affordable and recycled materials, she explained with evident pride. Her project was one of the most innovative we've ever received. The old farmer shook the young woman's hand with respect. "The future of American agriculture is in good hands," he remarked, looking from Lily to Jessica. Later, when almost everyone had left, Jessica found Michael waiting for her in the lobby. "Quite a night, huh?" he commented with a smile. "I'm still trying to process everything," she confessed. "Mr. Williams' donation, the training center." "You deserve it," Michael said. "You turned a sale into a movement that's changing the region." Jessica looked at her friend with gratitude. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't called him that day." Michael shrugged. "I just gave a little nudge, the rest was all you." "And Mr. William," she added. "I'll never forget the lesson he taught me with that old briefcase." "Speaking of which," Michael pointed to a small package on the reception counter. "He left this for you." Curious, Jessica unwrapped it. Inside was a miniature replica of William's leather briefcase made from the same worn material. A handwritten note lay inside. "So you never forget that the greatest treasures are often hidden in the simplest packages. Keep opening doors for others, just as they were once opened for you. With admiration, William Anderson." Jessica's eyes welled up as she held the small briefcase to her chest. That object symbolized not just the transformation in her life, but a commitment to the future, a reminder that real change begins with small acts of respect, generosity, and faith in human potential. The saleswoman who had once humiliated an elderly farmer now carried with her, both literally and figuratively, the wisdom she had learned from him. And just as William had done years before, she was determined to pass that lesson forward. One young person at a time, one opportunity at a time, one second chance at a time. End of story. Dear listener, what did you think of Jessica's journey of transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us if you've ever been in a situation where you judged someone by appearances. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next inspiring stories.